In the second lesson in this chapter on miscellaneous topics, we're going to talk about strings. And I'm really just going to talk about two parts of strings: how to parse strings using a special method, and then how to work with strings when you have a lot of string concatenation or string assignments that you're doing in one program. So let's start out with parsing a string. What we want to be able to do is take a sentence such as this: "Now is the time for all good people," and break that up into words. That's called parsing. One way to do that is by working our way through the string one character at a time and looking for spaces. Let me give you just a hint of how that would be done. First of all, the reason we're going to look for spaces is that's how we would parse this string, by looking for a space. When we find a space, then we know we've hit a word. So now is a word with a space, then we get to is, which makes a word, then a space, then the, which makes a word, and then a space, and so on. This technique works as long as you have well-formed input. In other words, if the string is well-formed, it has a space between each word. Could also be another piece of punctuation like a comma. But for now, we're going to keep things simple and just assume that the delimiter is a space. So if I were writing a program to do that, what I might do is I might first figure out where the first space in the string is by using the index of method. So index of will return the position of the first space that it finds. So once we've found the space, we can determine a word by using the substring method of a string and say sentence substring, starting at the start position and going space minus start positions. I left out one of my variables. There we go. We start at position 0, so that's going to be our variable start. So when we find a space at position 0, 1, 2, 3, we're going to start at 0, go space minus start characters, that's 3 minus 0, so we're going to go N-O-W, and the first word should be now. Let's test that. And it's right. Let's do one more word before I show you a better way to do this. So now we need to move to the next word is, so we got to move our starting position, so we'll start at space plus 1. We know that the space is not a word, so we want to start at the position past the space, space plus 1. Then we want to find the next space, so we're going to use index of again, but we're going to use a little different version. But we're going to start at the space plus 1 position, because if we don't, then we're going to start back at 0. So space plus 1 will now be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we're going to start at position 4 and find a space. And then we can say word is equal to, in fact, we can just copy. We can copy these two lines, save a little bit of typing time. We don't need to declare a word again. So we'll get rid of that. Now we run. And the second word is. And we could continue on in that manner throughout the rest of the program. But there's a better way to do it. Let's comment out all this code. The better way is to use a method called split. Split will take a delimiter as an argument and split the sentence that you pass it, the string, based on the delimiter that you give it. The only weird thing is that your delimiter has to be in an array so that you could possibly have more than one delimiter. I'm not going to do that to you. We'll just stick to one. And so our delimiter is going to be a space, the char space, like that. Then split will take its results and put them into an array. So we have to create an array for our words, and then we call the split method on the sentence. So we write sentence split, and our argument is delimiter. Then we can write a for each loop, for each string word in words, console write line word, and then we'll write a little finished message to make sure we know when we're done. Our split method looks for a space and then breaks up the string based on the spaces, so that we'll have an array called words that consists of the words in the sentence. So let's run the program. And there's our string. Now is the time for all good people, broken up into words and finished to let us know that we're done. So split is a very handy method to use when you're trying to parse strings. And it's so much more convenient than writing a method that would consist of code like this. Now, the next bit of technique I want to teach you about strings, we really won't write any working code. I'm going to show you some examples without actually carrying out the whole example because it's a little bit too long. When you have lots of strings that are concatenated together, there's a problem because every time you create a string variable, you create what's called an immutable copy. In other words, it cannot be changed. And when you do that over and over again, such as in a loop where you're constantly creating a string variable and maybe appending more and more data to that string variable or to those string variables, then you're using up lots of resources, both time and space, which is always valuable in a computer program. So the way around that is to use a class called the string builder class. String builder objects are what are called mutable objects. In other words, they can be changed every time they're created. Let me show you real quickly what I'm talking about. I'm going to write a method, again, that I'm not going to execute. We'll call this our string example. And in this example, we're going to have two strings, name and record. We're going to have two integer variables, grade 1 and grade 2. And we're going to write a loop. We'll do it this way. We'll do it from the console. I'm going to keep these prompts very short to make it easy. Then we enter the first grade. Then we do the second grade. Then we get the grade. And again, I'm just demonstrating some code that I'm not going to actually run. And then we could say record. I needed to initialize record. I'm going to go back and add that. And here I'm creating a comma delimited record that we could later on write to a file. So notice how I'm concatenating commas between each piece of data. So there's our record. And like I said, there was going to be an error, and I knew that was coming because I didn't initialize record, so I need to do that. And that'll clear my error. And then down below here, we'd actually write record to a file. This is an expensive operation because every time you change a string, you make a new copy of that string, and all the old copies stay around in memory, or at least until what's called a garbage collection is performed, when old objects are deleted from memory. But it still has a tendency to slow down your program. What we need instead is what's called a string builder class object. So let me demonstrate that. And we'll call this method string builder example. We have the same beginning code, string name, grade 1, grade 2, but then for the record, we're going to make that a string builder object. So we write string builder record equals new string builder. Then we can have the very same code we had before, so I'll copy all that. I'll copy everything as is. We're going to change this a little bit. Make it easier for me than to type it all from scratch. And then right here, rather than write a concatenation, we're going to write record append name dot append comma dot append grade 1 dot append comma dot append grade 2, and then we could write the record out to the file. This is much more efficient than using strings. And if you're doing many string operations in a loop like this, and 26 is not that many, but imagine a lot more, then you're better off using string builder objects rather than just string objects. So that wraps up this lesson on strings. We talked about string parsing and the use of the split method to make parsing easier. And then we looked at the string builder class to mention that it's a more efficient way to concatenate strings when you have many string operations going on in the same program. So now that we've finished talking about strings, we're going to move to the next topic, and we're going to talk about exception handling using the try-catch statement.